My name is Ernie Humphrey. I'm the Vice President of Educational Programs for Proformative, the largest online community and resource for corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related professionals. First, I'd like to welcome everyone to the webinar, The Rolling Forecast, How to Transition and Leverage Best Practices. Everyone wants a crystal ball to be able to look into the future. For businesses, that desire becomes a necessity when having a vision of the future allows for better and more strategic decision-making processes in the present. Rolling forecasts built on driver-based and project-based planning do just that, creating a framework that supports better decision-making. The webinar content today will focus on how to define your company's objectives in creating a rolling forecast, best practices in analyzing the dynamics and revenues and expenses in your business, and how to assess how external conditions impact your company's performance. I would like to thank Host Analytics, whose commitment to thought leadership helped make this event possible and delivered at no cost, like everything on Proformative. A quick note on today's agenda. First, we will hear a presentation from Arit Izips, focusing on best practices in transition to leveraging rolling forecasts, and conclude with an interactive question and answer discussion, which I will moderate. We will spend the remainder of our hour. We would like this to be an interactive experience for you, so if you have any questions at any time, please go to the questions area in your GoToWebinar control panel and send us your questions. We can't promise to get to all of them, but we will do our best, and we'll follow up afterwards on any questions we did not get to. Before we get started, a few more logistical notes. We will post the presentation to the Proformative site, where it will be freely available, and we'll send you a link to the deck as well. We're also offering CPE credits for the CPAs in today's audience. For those of you who checked the CPA credit box on the way in, you will be given that CPE certificate. For those of you who did not, on the final slide, you will see the email address for Dawn Moore, who administers our CPE program, and you can go ahead and send her an email. As I noted earlier, we will send you the slide deck later today. A quick word about Proformative. Proformative is the largest, fastest growing online resource for senior level corporate finance, treasury, and accounting professionals. Proformative offers a uniquely noise-free and valuable online peer network, direct subject matter expert advice, and features and resources developed in direct collaboration with our constituency. Okay, let's get started by introducing our featured speaker for today's webinar. Arit is an exclusive consultant with Host Analytics, specializing in corporate performance management. For the past 15 years, the focus of her consulting work has been on implementing financial budget applications, developing business intelligence solutions, and optimizing business systems processes to provide insightful guidance for executive decision-making. With that, it is my distinct pleasure to hand the floor over to Arit. Arit, take it away.
Thank you. So my background is indeed to work with a lot of finance groups, and just this past year I was looking at my own records, and I believe I spoke with 100 different companies and their finance groups to really understand their planning and projects, in their planning and budgeting processes these years. And I'm happy to be here and share what we see are new ways of looking into budget and planning forecast processes. Specifically, we're going to talk about rolling forecasts, and what we see companies do is best practices to implement that. All right. So at first, I'd just like to note we all see quite an evolution in the role of finance, and rolling forecast is just another play in that role. What we see is before, if I take a look at my career working with finance, initially, most of the part when I would work with them, they would be very focused on doing reports and audits and work in a reactive mode to look into the past and work from databases that had very rigid data formats. And so really the main focus was just analyzing and looking at financial data and reporting those results. In today's world, more and more we see finance groups stepping up to become the business partner for the executive management and the board of directors. They're more proactive. They provide data and analytics in real time because they have that kind of flexibility to slice and dice the data and ultimately help the business to drive better performance. And I believe a great part of that is moving from reporting the financial results to and more of a partner to the management is the possibility of technology. Technology had made ground leaps and bounds, and when finance groups have the right technology at hand, they become a key enabler for management to drive those performances. So if we look at some of the things that we're hearing from prospects coming into talking to Host Analytics specifically, and they're still in, using those more less sophisticated systems, if you will, or maybe even Excel, is there's a lot of process inefficiencies. For example, they don't really have version control. There's a lot of broken links between Excel spreadsheets when they're trying to do their planning and budgeting. It's really prone to errors. When the budget and planning process is complete and they're ready to produce the reports, they spend long nights, really, literally, to just consolidate the data. So a lot of reporting deficiencies, not in just compiling and consolidating multiple spreadsheets, but if they're then being asked to reformat those reports, that's also a great deal of work for them and a lot of manual labor. Once the budget cycle is complete and has been approved, for the department heads, they need access to variance analysis or just access actual data and perform some ad hoc reports, slice and dice the data, and maybe even present the data in dashboards. If finance doesn't have the capability of pushing those Excel spreadsheets, the data that's in the Excel spreadsheets into a sophisticated system where they can do these kind of reports on the fly and quickly, then that's another problem that we see that really impacts accountability of the department head versus their initial plans, or even timeliness of being able to create those variance analysis. And then, of course, once you approve the base plan, a lot of times the finance team needs to adjust for management adjustments, which really means running different what-if scenarios. What if we had this event happening, or what if we cut down marketing by 5%, for example. Those kind of exercises are quite difficult to do unless you're doing it at a very top level, and you lose the details of pushing those projections or adjustments to the base plan all the way to the department head, to the department level. And then, of course, it also impacts the ability to enhance performance. So if you're looking at also at a strategic plan for multi-year, most frequently this doesn't tie back to the plan that you did for just this year. So the short-term plans and the strategic plans are not clearly connected. And then, of course, if you needed to also think about what would happen if I took a certain decision, it's not so easy to understand the financial implications of those kind of steps very quickly when you're using Excel or rigid systems for planning and budgeting. So we really see two layers of impact at why companies are embracing technology. It really impacts the business, both in terms of process efficiencies within the finance team and the overall company and individuals who contribute to the budget, but also overall to start being able to contribute to better performance for the corporate as a whole. So again, looking at the problems we have today, spreadsheets, and then more spreadsheets, one for each department, one for reports, right? And those spreadsheets really create a lot of issues. So that's specifically when we see companies using Excel versus maybe an old budgeting tool. Key problems with Excel that we keep hearing again and again is lack of control. You send that Excel out, you need to make changes. You can't, or you're sending it out again and you're not really sure whether or not they're going to use the right version. You don't know where the person, contributor using your Excel spreadsheet is in the process. Has he filled in half of it, all of it? Is he done? You really don't know how many departments are done unless you count the Excel spreadsheets that have been returned to you. So a lot of disconnection issues and disconnected processes, and not a lot of visibility into the process. And then, of course, the issues with users adding additional rows or deleting certain formulas. It just creates a host of issues with the data itself, its accuracy and the quality of the data. And then finally, because consolidating the data and sending the reports, the variance reports, on a more frequent basis, it just takes too long, and that just drives lack of accountability for the results. Because if I am an operational manager and I only see the variance 3 months after things have happened, there's very little I can do. And for the most part, we hear that they really don't know how they're doing versus the plan at any given point. So those are kind of the problems that we see specifically arising from using spreadsheets. And so these are the kind of problems that happen when you use rigid systems. So if they're using a rigid system, so they're only budgeting for 1 fiscal year. And that, I think, is some of the reasons why we see this trend of a new way of forecasting where some of our customers are using a rolling forecast instead. So moving away from just using 1 fiscal year and start taking a look at the future, projecting 4 to 6 quarters, sometimes 12 and 18 months ahead. It really helps them assess what are the next steps in execution for their plan, understanding critical pivot events or points in the plan, and really better judge not just what is happening within the company and events happening internally, but also look at the changing economy and how does that impact their plan. And so in the next few slides, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what is the difference between what we've seen before and what we're going to see in the future. So just to summarize it all, what we see going out is things like just planning for 1 fiscal year. We're starting to look into a trend of finance leading the way and starting to look more further into the future, adding additional quarters or additional years to the current fiscal year to force operational managers to look a little bit into the future. With rigid systems, you typically see companies looking and budgeting at the cost center and the account level, where the technology-enabled process, we see finance enabled to look at other aspects like customer, by product, by vendor, by channel. Other very common things are to start planning by special projects, programs for healthcare, etc. We also see a trend once we have the plan and the budget online versus Excel spreadsheet. It's just easier to involve a wider audience, get them accountable, because now processing actual data and comparing it to budget becomes easier, and then the operational managers become more accountable, more collaborative. It's easy to add comments to variances, and the feedback becomes multi-directional. And if before, when we see customers migrating from Excel to a more sophisticated technology, they kept the plan focused primarily on financial drivers like previous years, growth percentage. Now we see them engage in more operational drivers. And if before they were looking at history, meaning lagging KPIs, key performance indicators, they start looking at leading key performance indicators, meaning external indexes and economic influences. So in the next few slides, I'm going to explore a little further at what we see in those best practices that we see companies really embracing. And what I'm going to do is go over each slide and kind of give you some recommendations of what things that you can think about, questions to ask yourself. So gradually, if you're thinking about potentially implementing rolling forecasts in your organization, things to consider and ask yourself in order to get there, okay? So the first thing that of course, been very vocal about it, I think, is that you need to find a system that can accommodate the different things that you will have to do in order to create a rolling forecast that is efficient and effective. And unfortunately, I believe Excel is just not a system. It's really a personal productivity tool. So I'm going to outline the functionality and practices that will outsource the capability of Excel spreadsheets. And the challenge that we have seen arises when companies start rolling forecasts in Excel is they simply can't keep them up to date because it isn't just a single forecast. What we see happen is once they have a baseline forecast, they start creating additional analysis and versions. For example, they look into understanding the impact of major and minor alterations to the plan. They run the plan against different drivers. They copy the plan as a baseline for other plans, create multiple versions, and then they perform variance and sensitivity analysis, which all of these things are much easier when you have the right technology in place. But to get the most out of rolling forecasts, I believe you really need a system that can provide the necessary functionality to accommodate your budget, your forecasting, your strategic planning, and any kind of measures and drivers that you need to make it more powerful. In Excel, what we hear is simply too labor-intensive and prone to errors, and it's too difficult to provide for the reporting and analytics you need to create this, to make this a powerful process. The next step, once you chose the right system, is really to understand what are the company's objectives in creating the rolling forecast. And the overall objective is in understanding planning is to create a financial view of the vision for the future and to the decision that you need to make and understand the financial impact of those decisions before you need to make them. So your objectives and your forecast for the rolling forecast will dictate the areas that the plan needs to be needs to have a little bit more detail. So let me give you some examples. If your strategic plan calls for acquisitions, you may consider building the plan with a high-level summary input for drivers that help plan for acquisitions. If you want better managed finished goods inventory, you may focus more on customer and product forecast and inventory management. If cash is tight, you'll probably focus more timing on events around cash. Accounts payable, accounts receivable, policies around those, cash borrowing, line of credit. The challenge is that there isn't one overhauling holistic model format that allows you to account for all of these in the first pass of rolling forecast implementation. And that's why we typically recommend that you start slow. And we'll get to that in a minute. So the next step is to identify the rolling forecast duration. The challenge with rolling forecast duration is that it sounds easy until you put pen and paper to begin implementing it. And there are a number of questions you may want to ask yourself. One, will you forecast every month or every quarter? And what we see with our customers is that many of them actually reforecast monthly. When they come on board, they tell us they do it maybe once half a year or not at all. Some of them do it quarterly. But we quickly see them transition into a monthly forecast because all the processes are automated and the plans becomes more driver-based. It just makes that process easier. The next question is, will you add a new month every forecast or just add a new quarter at a quarter end? And I'm going to make a recommendation here. What we see with our customers is that either they add a new period quarterly or they start planning for a 2-year time frame. With the first option, they don't really tack on an additional month to a rolling forecast at the end of every month. They typically wait till the quarter ends and then add a new quarter. Otherwise, each month you're making preparers think about a new forecast period. And so we have had customers try that approach of monthly reforecasting when each month, 1 month of actual falls off, and another month adds to the back end, and there was a considerable pushback by the forecast preparers. Genomic Health is one of our customers, and they do an 18 forecast period, and they typically add another. They do the reforecast every half a year, but then they tack on another half a year at the end. So the thinking is really more strategic for future periods. At Host Analytics, we take the second approach. We start planning for a 2-year time frame. So we do a monthly forecast for the first year, and we tack on the second year right when we do the budget plan. And so when we do the reforecast, the managers don't need to think of this new period added on every quarter. It's easier for them because they already thought about it at the beginning of the year, and then they just need to tweak and adjust it based on what happened already. And then when we start doing the second year, or we start doing a fresh new year of a budget plan, we eliminate the previous budget plan, and we use that second year as the baseline for the new year, which is actually making life really easier for our operational managers. The third question really to ask is how long should the rolling forecast be? So as I mentioned, Genomic Health does 18 months. We have some other customers that do 12 months or 15 months, or you may want to do what we do at Host Analytics, which is really start by forecasting out 2 years, and at the end of the first year, just stack on another year. And then finally, how would the mechanic work for the rolling in actual? So just as a starting point, make sure your forecasting timeframes are consistent with your business cycle and your business. Sales is 15 months from now and are dependent on some capital expenditures today, then it is important to create a rolling forecast out past 15 months. Okay, so we talked about choosing the right system, understanding the company's objectives and how to align the rolling forecast to that objective, and picking up the right duration period so that it aligns with the business process, but also with things that drive sales, for example. Another very important point is really to understand related drivers. Like I said before, usually companies, when they start maturing into the forecasting process, they typically start off with just looking at historical data, then applying a percent change. What we see as best practices is that our customers really take the time to understand and analyze the dynamics of revenue and expense in their business and figure out what are the related drivers. Rolling forecasts won't work if you create them from a bottom-up forecast every quarter. They really need to be driver-based. It just provides flexibility in the planning process and agility when you replan and create alternate plans. It also helps managers focus on what is really important, right? It really, because over time what will happen is that some of those drivers will be replaced if they don't really consistently predict the results, but the stronger drivers will evolve into key performance indicators and are going to be used as goal settings, and a lot of times we see customers add them to the dashboard. And over time, as you look into, you add drivers, you eliminate the weaker ones, you strengthen the strong ones and add them to the dashboard. This is an overall evolving process, and I will talk about it a little bit more in the next few slides. Overall, over time, the forecast will also start to use more consistent models, and model drivers will become clearer. Example of model drivers is, I mentioned Genomic Health before. Genomic Health is a biotech company here in California, and what they do, they provide solutions, or I don't want to say solutions, but medication. They do a lot of tests, clinical tests, to make sure that their medication for cancer actually works. And so one of their key metrics, they define between 5 to 10 key metrics. One of them is tests delivered and also the cost of the test delivered. So it's not really medication for cancer, it's really a test to give to a cancer patient that suggests what medication they should probably take or what would work. and then the average selling price for that test. And so it's very similar if you take a regular business to how many products have we sold, cost of goods sold, and average selling price. What they do is then they align these metrics with the operating expenses, but also how much staffing they'll probably need for the next coming period. And what they found is that the more metrics or drivers they actually set up to drive the operating expenses and payroll costs, less manual input. It just makes the whole rolling forecast process a lot simple. So they really use that keep it simple type of mentality when they're thinking about how to create their rolling forecast. Like I said, another example is sales units driving production volumes. Price increases could drive, for example, material and labor cost increases. When you think about your own drivers for your own business, you could probably ask yourself questions like, how does this line item affect my bottom line? Will a certain amount of sales affect this particular account? Or how does this number change my bottom line? Just to be successful doing rolling forecasts, it's really important to use drivers. It eliminates the detail while creating a realistic expectation about the future. And once you're done with your operating expenses and revenue planning and payroll costs, our recommendation, what we see as best practices, is to plan for capital and strategic projects separately from the rolling forecast. It really should be layered as a separate layer within the plan. And this is because these kind of projects, capital and strategic projects, they really do have two very unique characteristics that require, one, that they are time independent of the typical rolling forecast. And the reason is that projects can last months, sometimes years. So when you're treating them with the same duration as a forecast, it doesn't really provide the complete story around the project. Another requirement that's very unique to these kind of projects is that they typically have a lot of dependencies, which means that project expenditures can move out and in of the plan for a variety of reasons. So think about strategic plans like mergers and acquisitions, or doing a campaign in a certain region, or expanding to a completely new country. Those can move or shift in time as well as in scope. And so by having them separate from the rolling plan, you have the agility to just change the start and end date and see what is the impact to the overall bottom line very quickly. So you really want to treat them as a separate entity or profit center. Okay, think about it like that. And then have the ability to move them in and out of the rolling forecast completely or just shift them in time. And then in addition, they should have the ability to just change or adjust for scope, not just time frame. Like I said before, if you're going to be successful in moving your company from doing just one fiscal year into a rolling forecast, what we see work best is when our customers start small. Take a select group of individuals, to be either key department or operational managers, and plan to increase the scope of who's using the rolling forecast over time, and just continuously looking to improve that process. So really the objective is not just to start with a small group, but use them as a practice to flush out the process and look into what else can I do better here. Let's talk about it a little bit more. Usually conventional wisdom, when you move into a new technology and you're saying, oh, now I don't use Excel, it's really easy to get as many participants as possible, taking into account that if you're also changing your process for how to do the budget by adding those additional periods over and over, that might be highly confusing for a really big group. And also there's always a little bit of a risk when you're doing something like that because no one's used to it. A lot of it is based on theory. And when you take a smaller group and start with that, they're then available for you to flush out any kind of things that need to be tweaked, and this also offers them the ability to be then your champion in adding that to the additional participants and really functioning as mentors. So like I said, if your plan is not fully baked, which is, it's never going to be a first shot, there's always a risk. And so to mitigate that risk based on, and not do something fully based on theory, you want to start with a smaller group and then do it with a more larger group within the company gradually. So as you expand the scope of the plan and more people are shared within that process, the closer to reality the plan will be and the better the execution. So really think about it as a gradual process. And think about continuously improving it. The objective is not really to punish the guilty, but to better understand how to do it better, what to change, what were we surprised about, and what should we do differently to turn out better forecasts. So to improve the forecast, it's really important to understand the cause of the variables and to learn to reduce them through post-cycle discussions again and again until you get very close or much better over time. Okay, so let's say you're done with your first rolling forecast. Congratulations. What we see most of our customers do is they take that baseline plan and then use that, like I said, to then massage the drivers, adjust the values, and really analyze alternate scenarios. One of our customers, Boston Red Sox, they're taking their pace plan and then they play around with different drivers like number of attendees, different special events they're going to do in that season, how many games they think they're going to play, and whether or not they're even going to have any rain. So you're not only just playing with drivers and adjust values, you're also looking into doing alternate scenarios based on black swan events or potential significant events to really create a picture of alternate futures and then be prepared to make decisions if those situations arise. And so this does require a flexible tool when you're using to just mesh up these different scenarios and compare scenarios from different sources, meaning meshing up strategic plans and your bottoms up as well as those different scenarios of different events so that you can understand how those impact the bottom line. And so speaking of strategic plans, the beauty of then moving to a more technology-based tool is the ability to quickly understand how your strategic plan is tied to your operational plan, right? And better communicate that, the strategic objective of the company to your operational managers. Rolling forecast, if well prepared, really does form the backbone of new and much more useful information systems that really connect all the pieces of the organization and give senior management a continuous picture of both the current position and the long-term outlook. And that's something that's a little bit more difficult to do with rigid systems. Okay, we're down to the 9th best practice for today, and I think that's one of the most exciting new trends that we see with our customers. So before, companies used to rely heavily on historical data. In today's world, we see finance groups in companies analyze and understand how external conditions impact their company's performance. The reality is neither my company nor any company I know, of course, is operating in a vacuum. We all plan on, we all play in the overall macroeconomics. And so it's really key to plan on qualifying the key external drivers of your business. And it really becomes quite essential for business managers to support their decision making, not just so instead of the plan just being another management chore that needs to be done, and then they're basing their targets on some fixed revenue numbers that they need to reach. Instead, they start looking into percentages based on external market indicators. So what we see with some of the more adaptive customers or organizations that we work with is that they focus less on annual budget targets or long-term user targets that's generated from within the company based on incremental sales and income year over year. And instead, what we see them do is that they really focus more on rolling views and goals based on market conditions, like achieving market share or achieving cost efficiency over the competition by benchmarking against competitors or similar public companies. And I'll give you some examples. NPR, National Public Radio, is a media company in Washington. They really leverage external indicators to achieve more accurate medium and long-range plans. And they just use those leading indicators to spot new opportunities and really avoiding risks that reside outside their company's operations. At Host Analytics, we benchmark against other SaaS companies that are public. And so we're looking at historical, 5-year historical trends to kind of project revenue growth that's reasonable. We look at financial ratios, and we're trying to align ours with what the industry benchmarks are. Planner is another technology company that manufactures flat panel displays, and their business is driven by housing starts, and they use this driver, housing starts, which is like really an index that they can download from a library of indexes that is available at Host, to really plan for demand and revenue planning. So these are the 9 best practices that we kind of see that are the new trends within the industry for finance teams. This is what we see that they do. They really, and if you were to really embrace those best practices, again, some of the steps that you need to take is get a technology or a solution that would be aligned with what your business needs are, that would help you achieve your company's strategy and goals and objectives, and then think about your business drivers, right? When you set up the duration or comparison period, think about the people who are going to participate in the process and what would be making it easier for them if you were to start doing a rolling forecast. And for duration, it needs to meet things like if you know that CapEx, capital expenditures are going to impact sales, and have that kind of duration embedded in the rolling forecast so that you can clearly see an impact of decisions made in month 1 versus results happening in month 15, for example. Looking to related drivers from within and outside the business. Look into a solution that will allow you to do capital planning and strategic projects separate from the rolling forecast so that you can accommodate a different horizon if you needed to. And then to really embrace that new approach across the company, start with a small group and then gradually learn and make that process more and more efficient until you're ready to expose it to more and more people within the company. And then, of course, another additional benefits of using a driver-based approach is that the rolling forecast can then be used to just be your baseline plan and then create alternate scenarios quickly by just changing the drivers. So that, in summary, is what I was planning to share with you today. I hope this was helpful and you got a lot of different tips and things you can take away into your world and your company. And thank you very much for listening today.
Thanks, Arit. That was great content. I especially love, that slide that just builds on those 9 pillars of best practices. At this point, we're going to launch our polling questions. We would appreciate everyone's participation on the polling question. Please note that for those of you in the audience who are after CPE credit today, You will need to answer both of our polling questions. Again, if you have a question you would like to have answered by Irit, please ask it in the questions area in your GoToWebinar control panel. I'm going to go ahead and get us started with our first question as we launch the polling question, so we can make sure that we use all of our valuable time here this morning. Our first question, Irit, comes around, some people are asking, from your experience, obviously before you move to a rolling forecast, you have to, do your baseline forecast correctly. Could you comment on what are some of the common mistakes, that you're seeing, that you usually see? You have those 9 pillars. Is it duration? Is it identifying the drivers? What are your thoughts on the common themes that you see?
Yeah, I would say all of the above. It's really, what we see they typically adjust is, like I said, the first mistake is, when they sometimes try to add another month at the end of the rolling forecast, and it's really confusing for the operational managers because then they need to think about a whole new period again and again. And so what we've done at Host is really have them plan for 2 years ahead and just adjust that. That seems to be a lot easier for our operational managers. Another thing is to think about your own company, right? Some companies, I had an energy company that I was working with, they were planning 30 years ahead, which is the most extreme example of, strategic planning. But in reality, think about some of the decisions that you're making in month 1 and how long will it take till you see the financial results in other aspects of the business. So a lot of times they would just plan for shorter periods of time. So again, what is the period that you're going to tack on? What level of detail are they going to plan for those additional periods? And then the duration of the rolling forecast really needs to meet your company's business impact. So really that helps.
Okay.
Understand that?
Sure. No, that was great. Someone's at another question from our audience. As you mentioned on one of your stacks, kind of partitioning out your strategic projects and capital projects. So the question is, if you go that route, what are the drawbacks since part of the operation is to perform those specific projects?
Well, capital projects as well as strategic projects have their own life cycle. Some of them you're going to use for multiple years. You can tie them quickly to the operational plan by establishing links on things that happen in the first and second year. So I don't really see a big disadvantage in doing that. Again, it's going to give you the agility to change things quickly if you needed to, because those kind of projects have a tendency to get delayed. And so the ability to planning them separately allows you to do that pretty quickly. I can't think at the top of my head what would be the disadvantages of doing that, because I've seen that as being something that's being fostered with our clientele, and it's working out really well.
Okay, great. Someone's asking a question around the technology and application, and just answer this in general terms. Someone's asking, if there's one system that seems to be specifically developed for this rolling forecast process, or do you see this as more of a combination of the right systems for someone's company?
When you're looking to choose a system, I don't know if there's a corporate performance management tool out there that's just built to do rolling forecasts. But what you want to do when you choose a tool is just to make sure that it could potentially adjust for that, because this is definitely a new trend. It's a new way that we see more and more companies do it, or use that approach. But definitely the majority part is still in the old way of doing planning, which is just planning for 1 or 2 fiscal years. So when you're looking to choose a tool and you're into doing rolling forecasts, ask them the question or pose the question of, will you be able to handle me adding another quarter or another month or another year when I'm done with a certain period of time?
Okay, thank you. Next question, is around if you feel that there is a certain size for a company, where the rolling forecast kind of in general makes most sense in terms of the cost and value proposition. And this probably kind of gets to the economics of the systems component.
So really the question is, would it cost more to do a rolling forecast? And I would say if you stay in Excel, the process will become less efficient because you will need to add more and more periods all the time, so it really is more work. If you work with the right technological tool, the right technology, then you won't be spending more time on doing those kind of things. But then if you're right, if the company is really very small, maybe they don't have the funds to actually invest in that kind of a technology. What we see as a trend is that companies where they experience high growth and they're anywhere between as low as $10 to $30 million, like I say, high growth, maybe highly invested in, and the business becomes more and more complex, they start looking into these kind of solutions. The sweet spot is companies moving into, in general, CPM tools at around $100, $150 million, but we see a trend of companies that are even smaller migrating into using a technology solution as well, because it offers a host of benefits, including the ability of analyzing the data, not just doing rolling forecasts. And when you're in that phase of the business, when you're in high growth, being able to quickly analyze your financial data and being a partner to management and making decisions in such a critical phase of the business, I think is even more critical than when you're becoming a more mature company at the 100 and 150 million. But it really depends on the company and the way it's structured and how much investment you got in, or what is the rate of the growth. So for every company, it's a different story, and that's why finance is there to that kind of total cost of ownership exercise.
Okay, great. And I just, like to add, to the question. I think that in some sense, some of the systems, the economics or inherent barrier to adopting some of these systems has changed somewhat, just based on the amount of cloud-based and related technology applications that are out there. So, so I would like to add that, that the economics of kind of accessing the systems that might enable that rolling forecast have changed over the last couple of years, and companies that might have just had to walk away, given that upfront capital expenditure, those have kind of changed. So it might be something that's worth taking a look at.
Yeah, that's very true. And I'll just add to that, 5, 10 years ago, when I was in this business, we wouldn't see companies with less than $150 million worth of revenues even looking to get a CPM solution because it would cost too much and the implementation was too long. It was very accurate in the fact that for a reason we start seeing smaller companies moving into a technology-based tool because now you have SaaS solution with very much reduced total cost of ownership, and implementation time is weeks, not a year or a month. So that was a very good point. Thanks for that, Ernie.
Okay, great. Another question. You mentioned a few of your, obviously your customers are moving to the rolling forecast. Can you give us some generalizations on maybe what these companies have done right, to really leverage the rolling forecast, or their best practices that you've seen that these companies are they doing better in terms of engaging operations and finance, or any generalities that you're seeing?
Yeah, so maybe a couple of things. One, moving to rolling forecasts for companies that had successfully been doing that was really a directive from the executive. And so when you have the executive blessing, the operational managers are going to play nice, right? They're going to be enrolled in actually making the effort to make that change. So get the executives buy-in. That's the first step. Then the next step is really to think about how to simplify your plan. So instead of doing your regular, just plug in a number, start thinking about those drivers. Makes more sense for the operational managers to think about what is driving their expenses versus how much it will actually materialize to be. And then, so simple budget input plans that are very driver-based. The blessing from the executives. And third is start small. Take those early adopters that you know can embrace this new approach and are excited about it. Start using that plan with them and then gradually add additional contributors. And the reason you do that, again, is to be able to get some input and improve the process before you engage the entire company.
Okay, great. One final question before we close out the Q&A for Reed. Just kind of curious as to if there's anything on the horizon. You know, we saw your great stack there, and then we saw people, I think, starting to incorporate those external drivers a lot more. Do you think that that's kind of the next step, or is there any other technology or information that you think people will be incorporating to make those rolling forecasts even more effective?
Yeah, so what we see is very interesting, actually. There's different aspects of looking at external factors, right? One is to just be able to benchmark against other public companies within your industry. And I would say that's the #1 adoption that we see from our customers. Adding that to just analyze budget versus actuals and just actuals in general. And then the second thing that we see is looking at leading indicators versus lagging indicators. I think the reason this is like a second place is because it's a much harder thing to figure out if you've never thought about it before. But it's definitely something that we see more and more of our customers adding that into their planning plans. If there's any new trends that we see in terms of other external factors, I don't have anything in mind right now. I can tell you that Gradually Finance is providing dashboards and financial reports on a more ad hoc basis to operational managers. So they are looking more and more into visualizing, providing a full balanced scorecard, which really means define the key performance indicators to your department and help them understand which key performance indicators are more important than others, and make sure that those you assign those weights and KPIs to get to the strategy of the company for that year. So in that sense, if you're using a balanced scorecard, which could be a first thing that you can incorporate to your plans and your analyzing of the actuals versus plan, you're really communicating more efficiently to where you want your managers to focus on within the business.
Okay, great. With that, I'd like to go ahead and close out our Q&A session. Our warm thanks to Arik for her great insights and her time. If you would like us to connect you with Arik, please indicate that on the survey that we will invite you to take that will pop up on your screen just as soon as the webinar concludes. Arik is clearly a leader in her field and is an excellent source of information on today's topics. Also like to thank once again today's sponsor, Host Analytics. As a reminder, for CPE credit, if you did not check the box to receive CPE credit when you register for the webinar today, please send an email to Dawn Moore at dmoore@proformative.com in order to receive your CPE certificate. Again, please note that there will be a survey coming up as soon as the webinar is concluded. We appreciate your feedback regarding our event today. And finally, I would like to conclude today's webinar by thanking you, the audience, for your valuable time. And we hope to see you on Proformative.com discussing rolling forecasting and other issues and at future events. And I'd like to wish everyone a great day. So let's make it a great day, everyone. Thank you very much. We very much appreciate your support.